talk about one of the highlights of the Seder, something that I'm sure all of us enjoyed when we were kids, and even maybe today, and that is finding the Afikomon, right? We hide the Afikomon, the kids try to find the Afikomon, and then Jewish children become negotiators, and you start having these big negotiations. You know, when I was a kid, we would ask for like $5. I don't know when you were kids what they asked for. Today, it's like, I want a car, I need an iPad, a new computer, I want a 10-day vacation to Disney World. The Afikomon really evolved over the years, and it's not as simple as it was. But here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to talk about the history of hiding the Afikomon. Where does this come from? Why do we have such a practice? It's fascinating, because we're going to go on a journey right now back over 2,000 years, and we're going to read different readings from the Mishnah, from the Talmud, from the Rambam, from the Rashi. We're going to go on a journey through Jewish history. It's almost like having a conversation with the greats, the great minds and the great sages of the past, to see how they discussed and what they spoke about regarding the Afikomon. And along the way, not only are we going to learn some interesting things, I believe we're going to find some beautiful lessons for our own lives and to make Passover more meaningful. Now, I just have to say, I purposely did not choose a topic directly connected to the virus, although I had some ideas and things that would be very meaningful connected to what we're struggling with, and I'll tell you why. If you're like me, the news has been on all day. And all I've been doing is I'm listening to negative news. It's getting worse, it's gonna be worse, all this terrible stuff. So I purposely chose something about Passover, but not directly connected to the virus, so that we could sort of unplug from all that right now. And what I've found is in life, when things are confusing and times are tough, sometimes simply studying some Torah, some godly wisdom, is a breath of fresh air and something that brings calm and perspective to my life. So I think simply studying some quality, old-fashioned, modern-day Torah is something that's to be very, very beneficial. So we'll jump right into it, and let's talk a little bit about the Afikomon. So towards the beginning of the Seder, you have, now, does anyone know how many matzahs? Show me with your fingers, because I see your video. I can't hear you. Right? Very good. You got 3 matzahs on your Seder plate. Hopefully they're the handmade shmura matzah, the proper matzah we're supposed to use for the Seder. And towards the beginning of the Seder, we say Kiddush, and then we take the middle matzah and we break it in half, right? And the smaller half we tuck it back in between the 2 other matzahs, and the larger half is then hidden, and it becomes the Afikomon. And the kids, they start searching, and they become detectives and investigators, and they're supposed to find this Afikomon, and then they start negotiating, and that's the tradition of Afikomon. But where's the first time we see any source for hiding and finding the Afikomon? It's not in the Torah. You won't find it in the Torah. The answer is in the Talmud. There's a reference to something that commentaries say that's where the tradition of hiding the Afikomon comes from. All right? So let's see if we can do something interesting here. Anyone want to read text for us? You could raise your hand and I could unmute you. All right? Anyone want to go for it? Anyone want to read the first text? Okay, Leah, here you go. I'm going to unmute you. Here you go. Go for it.
Rabbi Eliezer says, we grab matzah on the nights of Passover in order that the children should not fall asleep. It was related of Rabbi Akiva that never did he say in the Beit HaMikdash that it is time to rise, cease study, except on the eve of Passover and the eve of the Day of Atonement. On the eve of Passover, because of the children, so that they might not fall asleep. On the eve of the Day of Atonement, in order that they should give food to their children.
Okay, so really the first line we have to focus. In the Talmud, it says, Rabbi Eliezer says, we grab the matzah on the night of Passover in order that the children shouldn't fall asleep. Now, the next reading, text number 2, takes this reading from the Talmud. It could be approximately 2,000 years, 1,700 to 2,000 years old. That's where the Talmud, was covered, when the Talmud was covered. Okay, so Rashi, which is one of the greatest commentaries, one of the most basic commentaries that everyone uses, Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, born in 1040, passed away 1105. He had a commentary on the whole Torah and the Talmud, and he says, what does it mean to grab the matzah? So Rashi explains, text number 2a, raise of hands. Anyone want to volunteer? Jump in here. I'll unmute you. We need another brave reader. 2a, who's going to do it? Steve, you want to go for it?
So I don't know. I'll give it a shot.
All right.
We raise the Seder plate so that the children will inquire. Others explain, grab the matzah, to mean that we eat it quickly. This is the more probable explanation. Judgment from
the fact, because it's a little blurry.
Oh,
yeah. That the antidote would probably Lezer.
Do I go down to 2b? No, I'm missing something then. It goes from 2a to 2b. Am I missing something?
Okay, so I'll finish. The fact that the antidote with Rabbi Akiva is associated with it. It might have been a problem with the printing. I apologize. So here you have something interesting. The Talmud makes a reference to snatching or grabbing matzah. And Rashi goes on to say grabbing it means that we eat it quickly, sort of to create like a little drama. We're sitting at the table, and all of a sudden, the mom or the dad, whoever is leading the Seder, grabs the matzah and snatches it and eats it very, very quickly. And the point is, the kids are supposed to ask questions. Well, why did you eat that so quickly? And then we start to address their questions, and now the kids are engaged. So I guess it's supposed to make it fun. So the first reference to hiding and finding Afikomon is in the Talmud. Rashi explains. Okay? And then Maimonides, 1135 to 1204. Maimonides builds on this in text number 2b. He should make changes on this night so that the children will see and will be motivated to ask, why is this night different from all other nights? Until he replies to them, this and this occurred, this and this took place. What changes should be made? So this is a Maimonides. He said he should give it to them, he should give roasted seeds and nuts. The table should be taken away before they eat. And matzahs should be, again, snatched from each other and the like. Now, if you follow along in text number 2c and 3a, you will see other writings and other sages that talk about this idea of grabbing and snatching the matzah. So this evolves over time. There's going back to the Talmud, they would snatch the matzahs back and forth from each other to get the kids excited. And now we have the tradition today to go and hide the matzah and the kids fight it. I guess there's less crumbs. If you hide the matzah and you find it and you're not snatching, there's less crumbs. Okay, so that's the history. Now, I'm going to put a damper on everything you ever heard Passover. All right? I'm sorry to do this, but I got to just give you information here. The damper is that not all Jewish people agree that we should be hiding and having the children steal the Afikomon. In fact, there are many opinions say that it is not proper to teach children to steal and hold the matzah ransom. Did anyone ever hear of this before? You could shake your head. No, many people didn't hear about this. Now, I heard about this at my father's Shabbos table, Passover table, because as growing up, my father would always quote the Rebbis of Chabad, and they say at the Seder of the Rebbis of Chabad, they would discourage the children from trying to steal the Afikomon. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. I'm a prophet. Okay, I'm not a prophet. Maybe I am. Hey, you never know. I might be one of the 36 hidden tzaddikim. But anyway, I'm not, don't worry. Or maybe I am. Anyway, some of you are thinking, what's the big deal? What's the big deal? Let the kids have some fun. You got to keep them awake. Keep them inspired. Like, why do we have to make issues out of everything? So in defense of those who have a problem with having children steal the Afikomen, the explanation is very simple. Children are very impressionable. Children are, everything we do and interact with them has a great impact on who they are growing up as people. You see, today I could learn something, I could forget it tomorrow, but children, the things they learn and the things they're encouraged to do or believe have an impact on their entire life. So the concept to teach children to steal the Afikomen and play this little game is actually discouraged, because it's not something that we want to impress on children. They say a child is like wet cement. You make an impression now, it's there forever. They say a child is like a small sapling, a small tree. God forbid there's a scratch in the tree, right? Years later, you come back and there's a huge gash. So the impact and the influence we have on children is very, very impactful. And as a result, there are many people that discourage. And you could follow along here on text number 4. By the way, I'm not going to be reading all the readings. I'm using this as a general guide. We may skip some of the readings. But text number 4. Okay. The custom in which the children snapped the Afikomen portrays the love for a mitzvah. Okay. Nonetheless, there are grounds to protest and annul this custom. And in text number 5, the custom for the children to snatch the Afikomen is frivolous and baseless. Heaven spare us should the Gentiles hear that the Jews teach children thievery to commemorate the exodus of Egypt. One who refrains is deserving of praise. So you may have never heard this before, but there are many commentaries. And the Lubavitcher Rabbi in text number 6 builds on this. He says, the custom in some communities is that the children snatch the Afikomen, which is thereafter redeemed for a gift, claiming that it is founded in the words of the Talmud. What are the words? We grab the matzah on the night of Passover so the children should not fall asleep. The previous Rebbe related that one time, as a little girl, the Rebbe Marash's eldest daughter snatched the Afikomen for her father. It seems that this was the exception, as the custom of snatching the Afikomen was not practiced in the Rebbe's home. So I'm sorry to put a damper on your childhood. I'm sorry to put a damper on the highlight of the Passover Seder, hiding and snatching and stealing the Afikomen. But there are many opinions that say we shouldn't do it. I'll tell you what happened in my house. In my house,
I was just going to ask you that question.
Yeah, okay. So I'll tell you what happened. Hi, Marcy. I'll tell you what happened in my house. In my house, every year, my father would get very serious, and he would say it was the tradition by the home of the Rebbes not to hide the Afikomen because we don't want to teach children to steal. Then he put a little smirk on his face, and he'd say, "Dear, I'm going to put this," and he used to hide it always in his jacket pocket, like we can never get it. And he would say, and I'm sure no one's going to try to steal it. And then the rest of the night, we'd all be like sneaking under the table to try to grab the Afikomen. So he made a point to say that, it wasn't done in the Rebbe's house. This is not a lesson we want to teach you. But his point was, let's have a little fun anyway. So that's the full story of my house. But it's interesting that people have a problem with it. And we could understand why. By the way, I just share a personal memory. Every year I used to ask something small for snatching the Afikomen. When you're 5, you want something like, candy. When you're 6, 7. I remember I must have been like one of the last years I was allowed to steal the Afikomen. I must have been 11 or 12. So I got the Afikomen, and now I remember learning in the school that you're not allowed to finish your Seder unless you eat the Afikomen. And, now I'm already older. I know the laws. So I realized 1 second, I shouldn't just be trying to get a candy. I could leverage this. There's a whole Seder in my house. There would be 20, 30, 40 people. I could leverage this against for whatever I want. At that point, I think the Game Boy was like the hottest toy. And I remember saying, I want the Game Boy. And my father said, oh, well, that's, that's a bigger prize. And then he says, you sure you don't want to ask for something a little, a little less? And I think I even said I wanted a bunch of games. I put something big on the in the negotiating table. And I held my ground. And he said, you sure you don't want to reconsider? I said, no, that's what I want. I know you can't finish the Seder without it. And then my father did something shocking. He went to the cupboard and he pulled out another matzah and he turned to everyone. He says, well, my son is driving a very hard bargain. And it's a little more than I'm willing to negotiate. So I hereby now deem, since I can't find my Afikomon, and he picks up the new matzah, this piece of matzah as the new Afikomon. And that was end of the story. I said, no, wait, let's negotiate. He says, no. And then at the end, I might have gotten something worth like $2. So I learned the lesson. Don't drive your negotiation too hard, because there are other, as much as I studied, my father, until today, knows a lot more than me. Please God, he should be well. But anyway, that's a personal story, memory from my Seder. But let's go back to the class. Again, if anyone has a question, feel free to type it in the box, or if you wave your hand at the screen, I could unmute you as well. All right. So, all right. It turns out that thievery, stealing, is not just connected to the Afikomon, but it's actually connected to the very exodus of Egypt, the story of the Jewish people leaving Egypt. All right? What am I talking about? Those of you who are a little more knowledgeable with the story in the Torah probably will know what I'm talking about. There's a verse in text, it's from the Torah. Pharaoh freaks out. The Jewish people are not coming back. They left, they're not coming back. He sends his horsemen to go get them, right? Follow along. Text number 7a. It was told to the king of Egypt that the people had fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and of his servants was turned against the people. And they said, what have we done? How could we have released Israel from serving us? Okay, this is the end of the story. The Jewish people left. 3 days later, just as the Jewish people were getting close to the sea where they're going to be trapped, the Sea of Reeds, Pharaoh realizes the Jewish people left. It's the strangest thing. What was he, senile? Does he not remember all the plagues? Does he not remember he was yelling at Moshe, take the people and go? Why is he like so surprised? It was told to Pharaoh that the people had fled. He knew about it. He chased them away. What's going on here? Text number 7b. And Pharaoh arose at night, and he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great outcry in Egypt, for there was no house in which no one was dead, right? So it's after the death of the firstborn. So he called for Moses and Aaron at night, and he said, get up and get out from amongst my people, both you as well as the children of Israel. Go worship the Lord as you have spoken. We saw earlier, Pharaoh said, go worship the Lord, exactly what as you have spoken. So why is Pharaoh shocked that the Jewish people left and they weren't coming back? So the answer is, if you follow carefully the story in the beginning, the first time Moshe approaches Pharaoh, he doesn't say, let my people go. He says, let my people go to pray to their God and offer sacrifices for 3 days. Does anyone remember that? Okay, you could go look in the Torah, look a little earlier. Moshe actually asks for a 3-day holiday, the holiday of Passover for 3 days. And so now it makes sense. Pharaoh is not senile, which actually puts a whole different spin on the whole story. Because according to this, you would think the whole fight between Pharaoh and Moshe, let my people go, no, yes, the 10 plagues, you would think, and it's common to think, that the request was that they should go free forever. But no, the request was only for 3 days. And God has to bring 10 plagues onto Egypt, destroying the whole nation. And finally, Pharaoh says, yes, you can go. But where can you go? Worship the Lord as you have spoken, which means 3 days. And then when the Jewish people left, right, they had the matzah on their backs and all that, and they were approaching the Sea of Reeds. At that time, it was already 3 days are up. And now it was told to the king of Egypt, the Jewish people weren't coming back. And that's why Pharaoh became very angry. Okay. So now we understand the story a little different. So here's the question. It turns out that Moshe lies to Pharaoh. He doesn't come and say, let my people go forever. He says, let my people go worship God for 3 days. And then they go and they never return. Why was that necessary? Why was it necessary for Moshe to lie to Pharaoh? After 10 plagues, after the death of the firstborn, after Egypt was decimated, there was no animals, there was no grain, there was no water, it was destroyed. The plagues brought Egypt and Pharaoh to their knees. So at that point, if Moshe says, let my people go forever, Pharaoh didn't have a choice. Yes, it seems that Moshe tricks Pharaoh. He says 3 days, and finally Pharaoh lets, and then they don't come back. Why was that necessary? Why was this so important to lie to Pharaoh? Just say the truth. Isn't Torah's emes, the Torah of truth? Isn't being honest the principle in Judaism, like a basic building block of being not even a Jew, of being a mensch? Yet Moshe has to lie to Pharaoh. That's what it seems like. So it turns out that not only do we have the kids at the Seder steal the Afikomon, but the very story of Passover is built on a lie, is built on Moshe stealing the Jewish people, so to say. Through deceit, Moshe frees the Jewish people. What's going on here? There's an optional section. I'm not going to go into it in depth, but I'm going to touch upon it. And text number 9, 10, 11 go into it. You can read it on your own. But here it's interesting. There's another story in the Torah about deceit and about being dishonest. Okay? Remember the story of Jacob and Esau, Yaakov and Esau, right? Yitzchak, Isaac, is supposed to give the blessings. He thinks he's giving it to Esau, the older son. And Rebecca, Yitzchak, Isaac's wife, wants the blessing not to go to older son Esau, but wants the blessings of the Jewish people to go to who? To go to Jacob, Yaakov. She says, Yaakov is the more righteous one. He deserves it, right? Remember the story. The story is Rebecca takes Yaakov and dresses him in the skin, in the clothing of Esau, and puts the skin of a sheep on his arms. So he feels and looks like Esau, because Yitzchak, their father, was blind. So he would come and feel the boy to make sure he's giving the blessing to the right person. Okay? So Jacob brings the 2 goats that his mom, the delicacies that his mom prepares, into his father. His father says, is it you? And he says, it is I, Esau, your firstborn. And the commentaries say, he says, it is I, Esau's your firstborn. He wasn't really lying. But anyway, it's a deceitful story. He tricks his father. He gets the blessing. And you and I, the Jewish people, are the ones that got the blessings through a story of trickery. But here's a detail that most of us don't know, something I didn't know until I read these commentaries a little deeper. And you can read it in the text on your own when you get a chance. When did that story happen? Why were there 2 goats? Why, when the older brother Esau comes in and says, Dad, I'm here, bless me, he says, I'm sorry. And he says, here, Dad, take some of the food I prepared you. If you remember the story, Yitzchak says, I'm sorry, I can't eat your food. And Esau is embarrassed. He's angry. He wants to kill his brother. That's the rest of the story. You know that. but he can't eat. He's not going to eat the food, and he doesn't bless him. Why doesn't Yitzchak just take a bite of his son? Worked so hard. Say, "Oh, so good. I'm sorry, I gave the blessing." He doesn't eat the food. It's a hint. That story took place on Passover. It was the night of the Seder that story took place. I know the Jewish people weren't freed from Egypt, but we believe that the 15th day of Nisan, the day of Passover, is a day where there's an energy of freedom in the universe. It was always there. It will always be there. It had nothing. Passover happened on the 15th of Nisan because that's a day of freedom. So we believe the patriarchs and matriarchs were actually observing Passover even before the holiday was officially given. So that said, there's a law, and I shared with you a little earlier. That said, there's a tradition that once we eat the Afikomon, it's the dessert. You're not supposed to eat anything after you eat the Afikomon. That's the case. Yitzchak had a Seder. He already ate the food prepared by Yaakov or by Rebecca. So when Esav came in and says, "Hey, Dad, I got all this food here," Yitzchak doesn't eat it because he ate the Afikomon. And once you eat the Afikomon, the original Afikomon was actually the lamb or the kid, the goat. So once you eat the Afikomon, you can't eat anymore. Sheds a little light on the story. So it turns out, not only did we teach the children how to steal Afikomons, not only did Moshe free the Jewish people through deceit and tricking Pharaoh, saying we only need 3 days, but it turns out one of the first Passovers in history is the day the Jewish people got our blessing. And how did we get our whole blessing of being Jewish? Our whole destiny? We got it through trickery. What is going on? There seems to be a theme of deceit through the whole story of Passover. Well, I'm done my class. I hope you guys enjoy. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Some of you are falling off your chairs. All right, no. We have to dig a little deeper, my friends. We have to explore some other ideas. If we study a little deeper, I'm going to enter a different realm. Out of the realm of practical Jewish law and tradition and stories, I'm going to enter the realm of Jewish mysticism and Kabbalah. Because when you look at the stories, not just as historic, but also as from a spiritual perspective, we can learn many, many, many interesting lessons. Okay. So before I answer the question, because even I'm in suspense right now, there seems to be a lot of deceit going on. So before I answer the question, here's something very beautiful, a beautiful idea that I've shared in my other classes. It's found in the Tanya, in the Alter Rebbe's writing. It's found in many Hasidic and Kabbalistic sources. The idea is as follows. Passover is not just a holiday that Jewish people remember that we were once slaves. It's not just about history and about some laws and traditions that we do. There's something bigger happening. The sages tell us, we read, that in every generation we have to consider as if we went out of Egypt. What does this mean? I didn't go out of Egypt. I was never in Egypt. How am I supposed to be like I went out of Egypt? I was never there. So Egypt is not only a physical place. Egypt is not something just happened in history. Egypt is an idea. How do you say Egypt in Hebrew? The word is Mitzrayim. And the word Mitzrayim, the root of the word is Meitzar, which means boundary or obstacle or limitation. The very word Egypt means obstacle, boundary, limitation. So what does it mean in every generation, every Jew has to consider it as if they went out of Egypt? What does this mean? It means that each and every one of us have our own inner Egypt. Each and every one of us have something in our life that holds us back from living life fully. We all possess our own inner Pharaoh. What is my personal Egypt? What's your personal Egypt? Everyone is different. Some people struggle from anxiety, especially times like this. We're living in very, very dark times. People live with tremendous anxiety. It's hard for them to feel like they're present when they're with their loved ones. It's hard for them to be present in their own mind, always anxious. Some people are struggling with fear, God forbid, addiction, some with arrogance, some with loneliness, God forbid, or despair, insecurity, laziness, dishonesty, envy. It may have been something bad that's been done to a person in their life a long time ago that haunts them every day of their life, God forbid. It might be something negative that we've done ourselves. But there is a Pharaoh in each and every one of us. There's darkness, and there's like a big wall that exists in every person. There's a different kind of wall that blocks us from living life fully. It might have been a dysfunctional family. It might have been a broken relationship. God forbid, it might have been abuse or molestation. Maybe health problems are weighing a person down, mental challenges. It could be financial defeat. Who's not hurting in the world today? When it comes to the finances, we're all in confusion. God forbid, it could be a loss of a loved one. But the point is that there's this inner Pharaoh in everyone's life, and it's different one person than the next, and that inner Pharaoh restricts us. Mitzrayim, Egypt, boundary, it holds us back from living our life fully. And sometimes a person is paralyzed and feels hopelessness. And it's hard to find a person's inner calling, their full potential, or their inner joy or confidence because of the Egypt that exists, not outside of us, but inside of us. And so what does it mean that in every generation a Jew has to consider it as if they went out of Egypt? Again, we're not talking about a geographical place. We're not talking about a time in history only. Of course, that also exists. We're talking about our inner Egypt, the little Pharaoh inside of us that doesn't let us breathe, that doesn't let us live, that doesn't let us dance, that doesn't let us sing our life, that doesn't let us be complete. And so this is what Passover is all about. In fact, we know we search for the chametz, the leaven, and we get rid of it. And we eat only matzah. And the Kabbalists say that the chametz, the leaven that rises, represents the ego inside of us, because many times our ego is the source of all this negativity that we struggle with in our lives. And the matzah represents the flat, plain matzah represents humility. And many times it's through humility that we could actually overpower our Pharaoh and break free of our inner Egypt. So Passover is not just a time to eat food or not eat food for some of us. It's difficult. Passover and the Seder is a 15-step program to inner freedom and liberation. And perhaps next week's class, I'll go through the Seder steps and show how the Seder itself is meant to be the steps and the path which leads us out of our inner Egypt and break us free from our inner Pharaoh. So this is a very important idea to really digest and internalize what Egypt, what Mitzrayim means, and what the holiday really represents. Okay, so we understand what Passover is about. Passover is a day where there's a spiritual energy of freedom in the world, and God gives us tremendous ability to break free from our inner Pharaoh and our inner Egypt. And by the way, it's a beautiful idea and so important, because in my life, I have things that I struggle with, and we all do. And I find that I sort of make a promise to myself that I'm going to get better I'll get less angry in certain situations, or I'll have more patience, or whatever it is. And then I find myself in the same situation, and I break. I don't follow through with my plan. And then a week later, I said, okay, maybe I'm going to do it today. But we keep reverting, and the reason is many times us on our own, we don't have the power to break free through the natural means, the natural energies we have. We need a higher power, right? Isn't that one of the 12-step program? You need a higher power, right? So we need Hashem. And as Jews, we've been taught something amazing. You could break free any day of your Pharaoh, but there's something powerful that happens on the night of the Seder. There's an energy of freedom in the universe, and Hashem helps us. So the Seder is an important time. It's an important, it's time to have a good time with the family, make memories and all that, but it's really a time to become the person we always wanted to be. Now here's the thing. Fine, Rabbi, I get it. Comes this Passover. I'm going to change it. I'm going to become the person I always wanted to be. You inspired me. I'm glad I did. Mazel tov, Baruch Hashem. But here's the question. When are we ready to live life fully? When am I ready to break free of my Mitzrayim and live life fully? When? Can I do it right now? Or say it's the night of the Seder. Am I ready to do it? Some people would argue, no. I'm too complicated. I have too many voices in my head. I have too much negativity. I have too much history. I have too many triggers. I'm too complicated. And I'm not ready to break free and become the human being I always wanted to be. I have to work a couple things out. Maybe a couple more sessions with my shrink. Maybe a couple more visits to the synagogue where I'm going to meditate. Maybe, and then I'll be ready. Rabbi, Passover is in a week and a half. I'm not ready. I'm not going to be able to clean my head from all the chaos and be that person. Not yet. I'm almost there, but I got to work on myself. So I guess the question is, when do we start being free? Can we start right now, or do we first need to become that better person? Because many times when we want to live life fully, we have these thoughts in our mind that say, no, you're not ready. You're not perfect. You got problems. You got issues. You got stuff to work out. There are skeletons still in the closet. So what do we do? So my friends, open your hearts and open your souls. Sometimes you got to become a little thief. Sometimes we have to become a little thief and steal something that the Yetzer Hara says, that the negative force in the universe or in a mind or in a heart says, you don't deserve. You can't have. Sometimes we got to snatch that matzah, or so to say, snatch our life, grab our life. Even though there are voices in our heart, in our mind, or from other people that said, oh, who do you think you are? You're going to become all that. You're going to become healthy. You're going to become good. You're going to become healed. You got so many issues. There are voices inside, outside of us that tell us this. So sometimes you got to just go and snatch it. Snatch something that the Yetzer Hara says it's not yours. It doesn't belong to you. A happy life doesn't belong to you. Maybe someone else, but you have a bad history. A life of inner peace. A life of joy. A life of faith. A life of belief. Oh, that's not for you. That's for someone else. You're too complicated. Sometimes we have to have the chutzpah, the audacity, the tenaciousness to grab the life we've always been dreaming of, even if the Yetzer Hara is yelling at us. No, don't take it. It's not yours. You're a faker. You're a liar. You're a tricker. We do it anyway. So there's room to be a kosher thief. Don't go to the store. Don't rob a bank and blame it on me, please. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about having a little chutzpah and looking the negative voices or the Yetzer Hara in our mind, in our life, straight on and saying, I don't care what you say. I'm taking this anyway. Call me a liar. Call me a con artist. Call me a faker. But I'm ready to live life like I've never lived before. I'm ready to be free. Tomorrow or today or right now starts a new life, a new beginning. So let's go back to the story of Passover, because I think personally I find this so powerful, so meaningful. Was Moshe lying to Pharaoh? If we look at the story, not only historic but symbolically, Moshe is lying to the inner Pharaoh. We have to lie to our inner Pharaoh as well. And take it a step further, the Jewish people who were in Egypt at that time, many of them lacked the faith to even believe it was possible to be free. That was the greatest darkness of Egypt. That Moshe came and said, God wants to take you out of Egypt and bring you to Israel. And what does the Jewish people say? What do they do? Nothing. They don't even hear him, because the load and the work and the slavery was so harsh. The darkness was so thick. They couldn't process what Moshe was saying. It was just like words. It went right over their heads. Moshe was holding the key, was handing it to them, but they couldn't hear him. So the 3 days of leaving Egypt was not so much for Pharaoh. The 3-day trip that Moshe asked Pharaoh about was really a message to the Jewish people. Let's go for 3 days and worship God. Moshe realized that the slavery was so harsh. If he tells the Jewish people, let's go, they're going to be like, we don't know what you're talking about. We've been slaves for 210 years. There's a powerful scene in a movie called Escape from Sobibor. Anyone ever watched that? Some of you are raising your hand. Okay. Powerful movie. Actually, it's about a local couple, the Rabs from Vineland. Anyway, it's the only story of a concentration camp or a work camp where people didn't just escape, but they took out the guards and they opened the doors and they allowed for anyone who was an inmate. Every Jewish person had the opportunity to flee and run. And it's a powerful scene at the end. They take out the guards. It's a real story. It's sad, but it's uplifting at the same time. And the last scene is the Jewish people are running through the minefields into the forest to their freedom. But then you see something else that's so disturbing. You see a bunch of prisoners are looking around in confusion. There's 10-minute window where you could run out into the forest and be saved, because in 10 minutes the backup forces and generals or Nazis are going to come to the camp and round everyone up again. So you see a bunch of people are just bewildered, they're confused, and they're shocked, and they sit down and they put their hands on their head, and they just close their eyes. And some of the main characters in the story are yelling and pulling at them, come on, the door's open, go free. But they couldn't go free. It was too much for them. They've sort of accepted their fate, their slaves. It was too overwhelming. When I saw that scene, and unfortunately when the guards came, all those people were shot. They weren't rewarded for staying. They became the scapegoats for everyone else. It's a horrible part of the story. But it reminded me of the story of Egypt. The Jewish people are slaves for generations. Their grandparents are slaves. And Moshe comes and says, you could be free. They're not going to listen to him. And so Moshe says, 3 days. 3 days they could handle. Oh, 3 days. You mean I could rest for 3 days? We'll go sit out in the desert and do some Jewish stuff? We could handle it. So really, it's another way of looking at the story. It wasn't Moshe deceiving Paro. And by the way, deceiving Pharaoh didn't deserve any honesty. I mean, the guy and the nation enslaved us for so long, and we don't have to excuse ourselves for that. But the point is, the reason why Moshe says 3 days is for the Jewish people, so they could digest it. So let's bring this into our lives. There's a voice inside every one of us, that inner Pharaoh, the inner Egypt, that says, you don't deserve to live life fully. You're guilty of this, of that. You're too broken. You're too complicated. Whatever the inner Pharaoh says. Passover is a time we say, I'm taking it anyway. I'm grabbing that life. And you know what? It's not even dishonest. It's actually the truth. Why? Here's another principle in Hasidism and in Kabbalah. Each and every one of us, every person has a neshama, a godly soul inside of us. We come into this world, we live this life, and no one comes out unscathed. We all have things we have to deal with in this life, in this world. But the soul, whether we've made mistakes or not, whether we follow the Torah or not, whether we're honest, good, kind, patient, loving, whatever, whether we make mistakes or not, the soul is always connected to God. And the deepest part of the soul is actually pristine and perfect. It's only the outer layers of our soul. There are 5 levels of the soul. The 5th level is the one that comes into our body. That's the only one that has to have cleansing from our lives, from our mistakes. The essence of the soul is absolutely pure, pristine, holy, godly, perfect, beautiful. You are beautiful. I am beautiful. Anyone you've ever met, even the most annoying people, in their essence, there's hope because they are beautiful. They are pure. Inside they have a neshama. And so, I'm not really lying, and I'm not really stealing the life that I dream of, because the truth is, there's a part of me that is beautiful, that is perfect, that is whole, that is intact, regardless of my mistakes. That's why we have the power of repentance on Yom Kippur. I've done so many things wrong. Maybe the outer part of myself, the animal part of myself made mistakes, but the essence stays pure, always connected to God. And just as God cannot be destroyed and God cannot be blemished, our soul, which the essence of our soul is a spark of godliness, it also can never be destroyed. So I'm not lying. I'm telling myself what I need to hear, so I have the courage to go out and start living like I never lived before, to live fully. Let's go all the way back to one of the very first Passovers recorded, the story of Isaac, Yitzchak giving the blessings to Yaakov. Why did Rivka make this whole scheme and tell Yaakov, I'm going to dress you up like Esav, I'm going to put the fur on your hands, and you're going to pretend you're Esav to get the blessings? Why did she even do that? Perhaps we can say that Yaakov himself didn't feel like he deserved the blessings. Rivka was sure. A mother knows the children. A mother's in touch with reality. She knew Esav was no good, and Jacob was the future. But maybe Jacob didn't believe it. So the whole fiasco of dressing up and stealing was a message to Jacob and to us as well. Maybe it's a message to us. Maybe there's a Jew living their lives today saying, I don't know if I deserve these blessings. I don't know if I'm connected to this religion. I don't know what I believe. I don't know what I practice. I'm not like Jacob, the dweller in tents who prayed to God all day. That's not who I am. I work for a living, and I got all these doubts and all these struggles. Guess what? The mother of the Jewish people, Rebecca, realized that there will be Jews who will live one day who may not dress like Jacob, who may not act like Jacob, who may not feel like Jacob, who may feel like they are lying to themselves, like they're dishonest. Guess what? She saw many of the people living in our generation today. And she made sure that the blessings of Judaism were given in a way that even if you feel like a con artist, like you're not legit, you're not as holy as a Jacob should be, she created a situation which we really could relate to. So we connected all three ideas. We understand why we steal the Afikomon. Stealing the Afikomon is meant to teach us to have the chutzpah and the audacity to grab life and live fully like we always dreamed of, and breaking free of that inner Pharaoh and inner Egypt. We also explained why Moshe tricks Pharaoh saying 3 days. It wasn't to Pharaoh, but it was to the Jewish people who they themselves didn't believe they deserved or they could ever be free. And we understand why the very first Passover involved this kind of deceit as well. So I'll conclude with a story. I'm going to tell you a story about the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement. They say about the Baal Shem Tov, he was a miracle worker, a spiritual. He founded the Hasidic movement. Beautiful stories. There are many stories. But they say if you believe all the stories of the Baal Shem Tov, you're a fool. But if you believe that even one of them couldn't have happened, you're a kofar. You're a denier. So here's the story. The Baal Shem Tov was surrounded by his students in the middle of a class, and suddenly a woman came running in, and she was crying, and she was yelling, and she says, "Please, Rabbi, bless my child. He's ill. The doctors are working on him. They say there's no hope. My child's going to die." And the Rabbi and the Baal Shem Tov stopped the class, and he gathered his students. They opened up a book of Psalms, and they began to pray for the child. He asked, "What's the child's name? What's the child's mother's name?" And they prayed. Let me tell you something. When the Baal Shem Tov is praying for you with his disciples, you're hooked up. And she feels great. She runs back to the doctor. She finds out that the child's getting worse and worse, and he's hanging on by a thread. She comes running back. She says, "It's not working." Baal Shem Tov stops for a moment. He thinks. He strokes his long white beard. And he says to one of his students, "Go to the marketplace, and I want you to round up all the thieves and all the pickpockets and all the unscrupulous individuals that hang around in the marketplace." And everyone knew exactly who that was. We all know about those kind of people, right? The ones you don't go into business with. They were Jewish people, but they didn't do the right thing. Anyway, they brought back 10 of such people. And the Baal Shem Tov gathered them in a circle. And he said, "Everyone put your hands on each other's shoulders." He says, "I want you to pray with me." Now, I don't know who was more confused at that moment. Was it the students of the Baal Shem Tov? Was it the woman? Or was it the very Jewish thieves that were being asked by the holy rabbi that they should be praying for this child? But the story goes that together they prayed for this child, and against all odds, the child has a full recovery and comes back to himself and is healthy. Later, the students came to the Baal Shem Tov and said, "What was that? What was that? We've never seen that before." And the Baal Shem Tov said, "God, everyone has a destiny, and God has a future for every person. Unfortunately, that child, for whatever reason, was meant to pass on. And even our prayers weren't able to help." But then I realized that there are people that have different energy about them. They're not necessarily people that are doing good things, but they got souls and they're connected to God. And what is their energy? They're the chutzpah that think that they can have the things that don't belong to them. The Baal Shem Tov said, we needed a different kind of energy to access the blessing for this child. And I was only able to accomplish it with 10 Jewish thieves. Anyway, I don't know if that's the story that I would tell in a regular situation, because it's definitely an odd story. The lesson is not to go praising anyone that's dishonest in business. That's definitely not the story. But there's something interesting about people having this different energies. Many of us have come to terms with our lives and we've decided, oh, this is all we really could expect. But there are people that live with a little more chutzpah. And we have to draw that chutzpah, not the other negative personality traits, but the chutzpah, the tenaciousness, to be able to go and say, I'm going to dream bigger than I ever dreamt before. And if the Yetzer Hara says you can't have it, I'm going to take it anyway. I'll conclude with a joke, because I think this needs a joke. Yeah, some of you, I told you the story of Yankel the Ganef. Yeah, in the shtetl, there were many different kind of Jews. You know, there was the water carrier, there was the rabbi, there was the gabbai, there was the shoemaker, and there was Yankel the Ganef. Yankel the Ganef had sticky fingers. When something was missing, Yankel, he was the one that took it. Anyway, one day, the rabbi was in his study preparing for his Torah class, when all of a sudden there's a knock on the door. Who is it? It's Yankel the Ganef. The rabbi says, come in, how can I help you? Yankel says, Rabbi, I was walking down the street and I found this wallet. And I know in the Torah there's a mitzvah to return a lost object. So Rabbi, I'm giving this wallet to you because maybe in Shul you can make an announcement Friday morning and see if you can help me find the owner of this wallet, because I know how important that mitzvah is. The rabbi is like, wow, Yankel, unbelievable. You've become a mensch. Well, the rabbi gives him a hug and sends him on his way. He sits down and then he feels in his pocket and he realizes his wallet's missing. He opens the door. He says, Yankel, get back in here. Yankel comes in. He says, what, Rabbi? The rabbi says, Yankel, give me my wallet back. Oh, I'm sorry, Rabbi. I'm sorry. It's a bad habit. Here you go. Rabbi says, Yankel, I don't understand. You just came in here saying you want to do mitzvahs, and you return a lost wallet, and then in the process you steal my wallet. What's going on here? And Yankel looks at the rabbi. He says, Rabbi, it's like this. A mitzvah is a mitzvah, but business is business. Anyway, my dear friends, this year as you sit by your Seder, and many of us will be alone by our Seder. And by the way, we're working on possibly offering Seders out of the shul in a box to go. Look out in your email. We're trying to hook that up because I know a lot of you are going to be by yourselves and we're not supposed to be together with other people. But today, when you have your Seder, this Passover, when we have our Seder, and it comes to the Afikomon, try to think back to this class and think about the things in our lives that we want to grab, the blessings and the happiness and the joy that we want to grab and make ours. And hopefully we'll be reminded that we have unbelievable power. Passover is the holiday and the day of freedom. We should all be blessed with the ultimate freedom with the coming of Mashiach. No more illness, no more COVID-19, no more restriction where we have to be isolated and alone and segregated and separated. Please, God, we should be together celebrating in Yerushalayim b'mehera v'yameinu. I thank you for joining me. I'm going to turn on the microphone, and I'm happy to take any questions or any suggestions. Let me see if I could do this. How do I turn on the microphone? Unmute. All right, you're all back on. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah.
Does anyone want to share any good Passover recipes?
Rabbi,
Yes.
yes, to go back to the 12-step program, there is a saying in 12-step programs, fake it till you make it, which is very similar to what you were saying.
There you go. Beautiful. Beautiful. Fake it till you make it. And you're not even faking it.
The other thing I thought about, when you were talking about the Israelites not listening and willing to leave. This is going back. If we go back to, and I just read this about a week ago, actually, that Harriet Tubman, who would go out and down south to try and rescue the slaves in the South, she said a lot of the slaves that she would go to, she would say to them, "Come, I will take you to freedom." And they couldn't comprehend it. They didn't even realize that they were slaves in many ways. And they wouldn't go. And she said, her biggest regret is that she could have saved so many, she could have brought so many more slaves to freedom, but many of them wouldn't listen to her because they just couldn't comprehend what freedom meant.
Right. That's a great example of this. Absolutely.